Hey, Secreters! Just wanted to pop on and say happy Tuesday. Um, it's a palindrome kind of day, and I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about some of the chatter that I've seen online with regards to whether or not history is important in the Solves and the Secret book. So, if you've noticed, I have a couple of great paintings sitting around me here. One in particular is pretty obvious. That's Rembrandt, the Dutch painter, who is kind of somewhat depicted too in the Dutch painting in the Secret Book. And you know from a previous video that I've talked to you a little bit about Rembrandt's styling, how he was the first kind of true pioneer of self-imagery painting, portrait painting, when mirrors were first invented between 1670 and 1680. And you notice he wouldn't paint his hands because he could never really get the angle quite right to show his hands while he was also painting. So oftentimes one will be tucked, like you see in his most famous portrait of himself, which he did, I think they said 16, I think is the rough number that he did of himself, although he taught many students the same artistry and they painted pictures of him and he signed them for them. So there's roughly 90 of those in existence. So why am I talking about Rembrandt? Well, and what does it mean for history? Well, it means that it's alluded to in the book. If we go and look at the paintings and we find the Dutch painting, lo and behold, we have somebody that looks very similar to what's painted there, right? Same likeness. So if I'm JJP and I'm painting the Dutch painting, why not use kind of like a Rembrandt feel, right? And that's where that comes from. And we would not have that if it wasn't hearkening back to history. The differences between history and historical. Historical meaning a monumental event. History meaning happening in the past. George Washington, who we just celebrated for President's Day yesterday, happy birthday, George, was an interesting character. Before he even became a war general and hero, he was a surveyor. If it wasn't for George's knowledge of surveying all the land before the British really knew what they owned and what they controlled, we might not all be sitting here talking like we are without an English accent. Coincidentally, it is written, he is one of the first people to write about finding what avogagos were, or at the time, avocados in Barbados, and some of his travels abroad. So, why do I talk about George Washington? Well, he's mentioned in the book too. And so, whether you're a lover of history or not, the book definitely speaks volumes about history in various ways. But why history is so important now, when we're looking back at the book, we look at the solved puzzles and we look at the usage of Paul Revere in the Boston Find. We look at the use of Mozart and Beethoven in Chicago. We look at the Greek philosophers and writers that were mentioned in the Greek poem. All of these things have a tie to history. So it's almost kind of really unbelievable when people say, no, history doesn't matter. You don't have to go deep into history rabbit holes. Well, do you? Or is it okay to do that so that we can take that knowledge and apply it more readily to what some of the answers could be? I have to wonder, even now, we're looking at 40-year treasure hunt. 40 years, November 2nd, 2022, will be 40 years. What's happened in 40 years? Lots of stuff. What does all that stuff equate to? History. So whether you're looking back in 40 years or you're looking back in 340 years, some of these things are hinted to, painted about, and alluded to in various ways. So I encourage you. It's okay to fall into historical rabbit holes. JJP himself said all the puzzles contain lots of ickles. Mathematical, historical, astrological. If it came from the horse's mouth, the horse is telling you the truth. Nobody else. Nobody else's opinion. No group thought about what's been put out there. Well, it's been said this way, and this has been found, and it's 40 years, and it's absolutely this. Okay, cool. So you pull a cask out and show it to me, and then I'm going to say you're right. But until then, we do each other a huge disservice telling each other that our history research and our theories don't matter, because in fact they do. And I'll explain one last reason why. In the beginning of the book, and we look at the credit page and we see that the book is dedicated to Byron's Russian authors, friends, colleagues, people that he looked up to. There's a reason for that. He's referring to all the history and the torture and the cruelty that were underneath this regime. Oddly enough, it seems like we're still going through it today, sadly. But if your own author and editor is trying to dedicate a book to people who have waged a war against communism and the history of communism, there is history to be learned in the book. Simple as that. Simple as that. So, if the people try to tell you, certain ones, that it doesn't matter, you remind them that Byron showed you it did. Have a good day, guys. Barry on. Until next time.